Well, the animation is primarily complete, and now we could come in and finesse with some controls that have kind of been missing in action for a good portion of the series, and it happens to be the channel controls and the motion graph controls. A little update to the program, and everything's working wonderfully now. So I need to call your attention first before we get into this, coming up to the preferences for Anime Studio Pro, and then taking a look at a little item here called Consolidate Timeline Channels. Now, if this is engaged, what you will see is what we saw for a good portion of the series, which was just a little document icon right here with no access to the controls along the side. You need to disengage this, unconsolidate everything to see the specific channels for whatever you animate. Now, there are tons of channels that can be animated, but you only get to see the ones that you actually do something with. So it's a nice way to go ahead and keep an economical interface. Something else to be aware of is that if this is engaged, the Consolidate Timeline controls or timeline channels prevents the motion graph from being visible. Hopefully there'll be a little warning or something like that that pops up. So if you happen to have this engaged, you will understand that you can't see anything going on in the motion graph, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. So here's what we're doing with our animation right now. We want to change maybe how some things work. Finessing can take a little bit of time because it's a great way to fine-tune everything and make it just perfect. Let's zoom out of our timeline a little bit here and see what's going on. We don't have anything selected in the scene except for the television area right here, and we see this little item right up here that layer opacity has been worked with, and we've got that cyclical animation that does that. Let's not take a look at that. We can go through every item here and we'll see different presentations of what shows up here in the channels. But really what's showing up consistently is the camera, because we're kind of at the top level. We haven't bored into any of these items. So let's take a look at the channels themselves. Let's scrub this timeline, get our character doing his thing. But near the first keyframe here is when we get our camera moved, it zooms in to the clock. And then it zooms out and pans a little bit as we pull back so we can see our character show up outside the window right there. Here's where we want to make a fine-tune adjustment. We may want to linger on the clock for just a second. Right now we come in and move closely, and then it starts moving sideways and then begins pulling back. There's a couple ways to do it. We could simply copy these keyframes right here and then paste in this area. That could be something entirely viable to do. But let's look at how this is presented in another control set we haven't seen, which is the Motion Graph Editor. When you click this, you will see that you've got the same keyframes, but now we're seeing kind of related motion around them. Let's explain how to work these tools right here real quickly. If I click just once, we can turn them off or on. Behind each one of these little items, and we've got a camera zoom enabled, you'll notice that the background is green. That means that the green line in the scene corresponds with this icon. Really important when you start having a bunch of channels animated that you can break them apart. Let me turn this one off by clicking on it once. When I click this one, we'll see that we've got multiple lines. They're all the same color. If we wanted to begin editing this item right now, and any channel you want to edit here in the Motion Graph Editor, you double click. So I'll do that, and suddenly we get multicolored lines. Very faintly behind this icon, you'll see that we have a red, green, blue change in the color. That relates to typically red, green, and blue coming in order of X, Y, Z for rotation and movement through a scene. But we know that we zoom in and then we keep it level at one spot and then zoom out, and we're seeing that action right here. You can use your scroll wheel and kind of click into the scene if you want more specific information. We can, just like we could with the pure channels presentation here in the motion graph, highlight these keyframes. We can go ahead and copy them, and we can paste them right where the current marker is in the timeline. So if we say paste, we'll see they show up there, and then we see we get the change in motion. If I wanted to accelerate or slow down one of these items right here, well, then I could go ahead and select the keyframe. Let me highlight that. Let's open our keyframe settings here, and we could change interpolation modes. If we wanted to, for example, select this one and change it from smooth to Bezier, we'll get control point handles. We can then adjust the rate of the curve. So there's some fantastic tool sets that are available to you to really smooth out or finesse the motion inside of Anime Studio Pro in the context of the Motion Graph Editor. So with this little edit here, we get our camera that flies in if we want to keep it. it holds for just a second and then begins pulling away. So there are just some real nice tool sets for that. You'll notice we have an extra bit of motion right here. Let's stop the timeline indicator right there. Switch tools. And if I double click on this to edit it, then we can say, you know what? Maybe I want to go ahead and copy this keyframe right here and move down the line and paste it in as well to the other area. If we highlight this section so we can see that, move this down to the keyframe right there. We'll come back to this item to edit this, and let's go ahead and paste that. And now we've got consistent movement between the zoom, the horizontal scroll, all that information. So we get a nice fly in, a quick hold, and then we zoom back out. So there are some fantastic ways and tool sets to go ahead and really finesse the motion, whether it's camera, whether it's character, particles, everything can be adjusted with the Motion Graph, just a super tool inside of Anime Studio Pro.